Trump's protesters broke through a police barricade on the Capitol, and nothing was being done about it. So contrast that to other previous protests by other groups of people, and guess what? No rubber bullets. This has been going on now for over a half hour, and Confederate flags are flying on the Capitol steps and even entering the Capitol building. Now imagine if this were another protest group. Don't tell me that you would not be seeing rubber bullets fired, first of all, a command to disperse, second of all, tear gas, third of all. Tell me, or even blood flowing down the Capitol steps. Now, I don't want any of this for anybody, but if you don't see the blatant disregard or complete discrepancy between how people groups are treated. Now, I'm seeing somebody coming out on a stretcher and that sort of thing. But as you can see, they were allowed to break through this barricade. And some of them have entered the Capitol building in one of the most highly secured, important legislative events of the year, right? Which I hope you check out my other 2 videos that I made previously, which explain that I expected this kind of noise. The only thing I'm a little shocked about today is that the lack of police response, in the sense of, if this was another group, like I said, if this was another group, they would not still be congregated on those Capitol steps. They would have been shot with rubber bullets and tear gas, and it's an absolute disgrace right now. We are watching in real time the state of the United States when it comes to privilege of people groups. And the fact that they are allowed to do this is very, very telling. And we are going to deal with it going forward, because it's time for this kind of thing to stop. Now, what I was going to address earlier is what is happening in this legislative process today, which is pretty much a done deal. It's a pretty simple thing, and this is a distraction. So that's important to know. It's just a distraction. There's no, there's no real cause for alarm of the election being overturned, because that's not going to happen. It's just a delay. Now, without this protest outside, the most they could delay it would be officially, clock hours would be like 100 hours. And that would be if all 50 states raised an objection that was supported by a House member and a senator. If they were able to do that for all 50 states, which they're not, they could extend this feasibly 100 hours before, by Constitution, they have to reconvene and basically end this by counting the vote, right? We knew this distraction was coming. I just, wasn't expecting them to be able to break through a police barricade and watch as nothing is done about it. That part we're going to have to deal with Confederate flags flying on the Capitol steps. Not only just regular Confederate flags, the Confederate flags that I saw flying on the Capitol steps with semi-automatic rifles. If that is not an act of intimidation, you are out of your mind. If you are still following Trump prophets, those of you who consider yourself spiritual or religious, you're out of your mind. And you can go look at my previous videos on that. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, by the way, because I'm going to be addressing this stuff going forward. And anybody who's casting their lot right now with this sort of behavior and activity, and who's not willing to at least admit, you could be a Trump supporter and at least admit there's definitely preferential treatment going on right now when there are no rubber bullets flying, there are no tear gas flying, and we're going on 45 minutes of an occupation of breaking through a police barricade with nothing being done about it. No, I'm sorry. So the end result, of course, is however long it takes for the legislature to come back together to reconvene. I was thinking maybe into the late night if they were able to raise enough objections and that sort of thing, and that would be the end of it. Mike Pence has already told the president and told the people that his job is just to announce what's in those envelopes, and that's it. He's got a ceremonial position, not an authoritarian one. Those who want an authoritarian government, go find yourself a fascist nation to move to, because we're not having it. So, um, you know, you guys would be describing the people on the right. You guys would be describing these people as thugs. What makes that different? What makes that different? Huh? Breaking through a police barricade, entering the Capitol building with a live session going on, gas masks being dispersed or given out to the members of the government. If that's not sedition, if that's not some sort of punishable offense, these people need to be charged, and they need to be punished. There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt about it. So, I mean, the good thing is we have camera angles from all over the place, and each person who's on those steps right now, who went into the Capitol building, they need to be punished. But let's get back to what really matters, and that is, we knew today was going to be a big day. That's why I produced 2 videos about it that you should go watch, because what I was really going after was, how do people get to this point, right? How do they? I mean, propaganda has always existed. We have plenty of historical evidence of how propaganda works and how people fall into it. And yes, for those of you on the right who want to think that everything is in a binary, propaganda is on the left and the right. Of course it is. And none of us are immune from propaganda. Okay, I mentioned that earlier in another show. But the point is, when you have religious folk claiming to speak for God, pushing this sort of activity and behavior, we have a real problem. And so, as someone who has worked within these circles of the charismatic and prophetic movements and that sort of thing, and know some of these people, and have worked with them and been in and among them, I know what they are. I know they couldn't hold a job like many of you out there working hard, paying your tithes and offerings to these churches and buying their products and all that kind of stuff. They, they wouldn't be willing to do that for you. Let me just tell you that right now. Just like Trump wouldn't be willing to go and work a real job to prove that he knows what it's like to be a working American. And you guys have been duped to think that this oligarch, I mean, he's not really that rich, but I mean, like, that he really cares. He really cares about you. Come on. He just threw Mike Pence, your faithful evangelical vice president, as of this morning, threw him under the bus. The second in command threw him under the bus. Why? Because he decided that he was going to follow the procedures that are expected by the U.S. Constitution. Do you need any more proof than that? Honestly, do you need any more proof that Trump does not care about the constitutionality of anything? You can even believe in voter fraud, that voter fraud existed, although the one leading this charge is the same one, pushing sedition right now. You can believe that all you want about voter fraud, but if you think it's okay to break through a police barricade with a session that's going on, I mean, and think about it. You're trying to disrupt a process of even your objections being heard. There's a name for that. It's called intimidation, and it's called, you shouldn't be able to be allowed on those steps in the first place. And I can guarantee you that we are going to make sure that that doesn't ever happen again. There will never be a Confederate flag flying on the U.S. Capitol steps again, like we saw today. Now, back to the, I'm just looking at this crowd, and it's disgusting. It's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. And it's not even, so my point is this, is that you guys buy these products. Mark Taylor, for example. Let's talk about Mark Taylor for just 1 second. Mark Taylor is the one who predicted supposedly predicted that Donald Trump would become president. Now, I'm not going to dispute that particular one because I think there's good evidence that he did say that. What you do need to understand is in context, prophets, supposedly, these guys that call themselves prophets, they say lots of things. And then when something sticks, then it's promoted. When it doesn't turn out that way, there are methods of deflecting from the failed prophecies. No one ever like admits that there's a failed prophecy. Very few exceptions. Or they're vague. You know, Kim Clement is one of them. I know some of my friends are, followers of his and like him, but the bottom line is the guy, is a performance artist. It's a performance art. You get up there with the melodramatic music, la 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 about some stuff, and of course some of it's going to come true. I mean, like, or not come true, but there will be subsequent events that could match up with potentially with something vague that you say. So, I mean, he did say like Trump will be a trumpet. He didn't say Trump will become the president of the United States. So even the Kim Clement people, they have to cut and paste these prophecies to make them work. Because then there's another one about a praying president and all that other kind of stuff, even though there really is no evidence about that. He just allowed, he allowed people like Paula White, and these other people, to have White House access. But you can tell if you've been in these movements, you can tell if you've been in these churches and understand the language and the lingo, because there is an internal lingo. You can tell if somebody is an insider, really understands the message that you believe in or not. Because they just don't have the language. They're not fluent in the language. And Trump clearly does not have the language that these prophetic, churches, so-called, that they use. It's very clear. And one of this, even on the evangelical side, when Trump was speaking at Liberty University a few years ago, and he holds up the Bible and talks about 2 Corinthians. Every evangelical knows that it's called 2 Corinthians, and why make a big deal out of that? Because these are very important cues for those of you who know better, that a person is conning you. He's conning you. And just because he gives into what you want politically, that doesn't make it morally right to justify this kind of behavior we're seeing right now. I'm sorry, but it doesn't. And so I've called January 6th the day of repentance for the Trump prophets. This is your chance to come clean and say, you know what? Mark Taylor, you predicted that there would be a second term, and now you have people willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen, to make that prophecy, self-fulfilling prophecy, come to pass. And when it doesn't, you should give back every penny of every book that you've sold. You should give back every penny of any movie royalties of that terrible movie that was produced about you. But you won't. These guys won't. And that's what upsets me more than anything else. This little sideshow on the steps of the Capitol right now is upsetting. But what's more upsetting is that many of you are going to go back to church and give these people your money and your allegiance. And they don't deserve it. They would never do the same thing for you. They wouldn't. And I think deep down, a lot of you guys know it. And I think that's why I brought that up. Now, will I talk about spiritual matters and that sort of thing? I have a spiritual tradition, and it includes some of the prophetic. Bishop Veron Ash was my bishop, and he was well known as a prophetic figure. In the same movements that I'm talking about right now, and he had similar criticisms that I do. So for those of you who are upset at me for saying some of those things, you should keep that in mind. All right. And if you want to know more about this, I will be putting a lot of it out very soon. So you need to do me a favor and subscribe to the channel, because I'm just starting. And so I've got not even like 100 followers so far, but that's going to change. We're going to get it. And we're going to continue with moving forward with educating each other. We learn from each other. As a teacher, I can tell you that it's not just the teacher who deposits knowledge into the student. It's a reciprocal process where we learn from each other. And any teacher that doesn't work in that way, what we call dialogical instruction, you got to watch out for, because they're depending on they're depending on your subservience to their position, in order to justify their manipulation. So I think you'll find that I'm pretty honest about where I come from, and that I will learn from you just as much as you learn from me, and that is true pedagogy. That is true teaching. So I'm looking at a live shot right now back into the joint session, and it does appear that these protesters have actually entered the chamber. I want so bad to tune in myself, but I think what's more important at this moment is to address the real issue behind all this, because this sideshow will end, and the vote will be counted. But I'm more interested in the aftermath. I'm more interested in the fact that these people were allowed to even enter the Capitol building without being shot by rubber bullets, gas, and all that kind of thing. It's an absolute disgrace. And any Trump supporter who really, really believes in the Constitution and that sort of thing, you should be upset too. And if you're not, we know where you stand with your false prophets. Okay? So you can find out more information about my podcast, this channel, subscribe to it so that you can stay updated with things. Go check out some of these previous videos that I just published, because I predicted what was going to happen today. Not to the extent that it went, but I knew that this sideshow was going to be the last attempt to try to disrupt this count that's inevitable. And if you need to know anything about what's going on right now, just look at what Trump just did to Vice President Pence. And you ask yourself, those of you who are Christians and that sort of thing, who's the Christian here? You know, Mike Pence has a long history of actually being really involved in the evangelical Christian church. Trump does not. And you have to ask yourself, is this really the behavior of somebody who supposedly represents Christ? That's blasphemy. And I would be very, very worried if I were you from your religious perspective. You better make sure that you've discerned that one correctly, right? So yeah, protesters are now inside on the Senate floor and are being allowed to do so. And that is the great discrepancy, that you have drawn that line in the sand, and enjoy it for the moment. But yeah, that's where we're going to end things today. So you guys take care. Go to avipenhollow.com, join the podcast proximity portal. You can also support me on this program on Patreon. You can find that all on my webpage, avipenhollow.com. I'll put that description below this video. You guys take care, stay safe, and stay sane, even in this crazy day. And we'll see you next time.